ᴄᴏᴘᴘыឫ, a 26-year-old retired pro gamer, finds himself in a dimly lit, endless hallway, battered and holding a shield. Exhausted and barely hanging on, he suddenly feels a sharp attack pierce his leg, forcing him to collapse to the ground in pain. Though he wants nothing more than to return to the safety of the waiting room, his injured leg won't support him. Desperately trying to stand, he falls again and is struck by the terrifying reality of his situation. This pain is real, and he might die here. As he struggles, a glowing status window flashes before him, notifying him that he's gained pain tolerance level 1. He grimly wonders how things went so wrong and recalls the moment he first encountered the status window. It had offered him a choice between tutorial difficulties: easy, normal, hard, and hell. At the time, he had confidently picked hell mode, believing he could handle it. Now, regret begins to weigh on him as the pain grows unbearable. But as he endures, his pain tolerance rises to level 2, and the status window updates again, informing him he's also gained hemorrhage resistance level 1. 2 years earlier, ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ was in his room, sitting at his desk surrounded by empty beer cans. Tired and dejected, he had quit his pro gaming career and used his savings to open a convenience store. However, he quickly handed over its management to his part-time employees and retreated into isolation. At just 26, he had already given up on his career and was consumed by a deep sense of boredom. During his prime, ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ was celebrated as the greatest pro gamer of his time. However, the competitive gaming world is ruthless, and as younger players rose to prominence, he eventually lost his place at the top. Frustrated and defeated, he quit gaming entirely. Now, his days are monotonous, with nothing to excite or challenge him. One day, as he sat idly staring at his computer screen, a news notification caught his attention. Clicking on it, he learned about mysterious sinkholes appearing across the world. Authorities claimed to be investigating their cause, but no clear answers had been found. Experts warned people to avoid the areas near these sinkholes, calling them dangerous and unstable. As he read the article, something strange happened. A status window suddenly appeared in front of him. It informed him that he had been invited to the tutorial world. Staring in shock, ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ couldn't tell if it was a prank, a hallucination, or something else entirely. He hesitated, blaming his earlier drinking, but curiosity got the better of him. The window asked him to choose whether to enter the tutorial world with a simple yes or no. After a moment of deliberation, he clicked yes. Next, the window asked him to select a difficulty level: easy, normal, hard, or hell. Without thinking twice, ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ chose hell mode, confident in his skills as someone who had never backed down from a challenge. He believed this would be just like the games he had mastered before. Suddenly, he found himself in a vast, white space filled with other confused people. They all looked just as disoriented as he felt. A man in a suit stepped forward, trying to stay composed, and asked if anyone knew what was going on. Some began to share their thoughts, and ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ mentioned the news about the sinkholes. However, a fierce-looking blond man dismissed his comment angrily, brushing it off as irrelevant. The man in the suit quickly intervened to calm everyone down. During the exchange, ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ noticed something strange. Just moments earlier, he had been drunk, but now he felt completely sober and clear-headed. When he pointed this out, the man in the suit explained that in this place, the body recovers at an accelerated rate. Before they could process any more, a new notification appeared on ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ's status window. It was time to choose a starting weapon. Almost instantly, he finds himself transported to what looks like a massive weapon warehouse. Rows upon rows of weapons of every kind stretch as far as the eye can see. Realizing the importance of this decision, he takes a deep breath and carefully examines his options. He knows that, just like in a game, the weapon he chooses now could greatly affect his future path in the tutorial world. ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ steps into the weapon house, overwhelmed by the sheer variety of choices before him. As he scans the rows of swords, axes, bows, staves, and other tools of combat, he starts thinking carefully about what to pick. His first thought is to consider his playstyle. In games like this, roles often fall into the categories like damage dealers, tanks, or healers. He knows he needs a weapon that matches his style, build, and abilities. Looking at himself, he acknowledges that he doesn't have a lot of muscle mass. Heavy weapons like axes or blunt tools, as well as magical staves, are out of the question. Swinging a large weapon or relying on magic doesn't suit him, so he decides to rule those options out immediately. Next, His mind shifts to long-range weapons, such as bows or crossbows. They are appealing because they allow for safer attacks from a distance, but he knows there's a downside. Using long-range weapons effectively often requires someone to watch your back or the freedom to move around quickly. Plus, it depends heavily on the type of opponent. What if he ends up in close quarters or facing the 3 people he met earlier? Those scenarios would put him at a disadvantage with a long-range weapon. Considering this, he begins to lean toward close-range weapons. Reflecting on his earlier interaction, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ regrets not asking those 3 what weapons they planned to choose. If they ended up as allies, it might have helped him make a more balanced decision. But on the off chance they became enemies, having a close-range weapon might give him a better chance in a fight. ᴄᴏᴘᴘ doesn't fully understand what this game is about, but one thing is clear to him. The difficulty he chose is Hell Mode. With that thought in mind, he carefully reviews everything he has considered so far and decides to go with a sword and shield. When he selects them, the system provides a brief description of their features. However, he quickly notices that both are second-hand weapons. Disappointment washes over him as he inspects their worn surfaces. But when he takes a closer look at the other weapons available, he realizes none of them are in better condition. Resigned to this choice, he prepares to move forward. The system then asks him to confirm if he wants the sword and shield. He hesitates for a moment, considering his options, but ultimately decides to stick with his choice and confirms. Returning to the others, he finds the group waiting. The man who appears to be the oldest among them notices that ᴄᴏᴘᴘ has chosen his weapons and prepares to address everyone. However, the fierce-looking blonde man, who dislikes ᴄᴏᴘᴘ, interrupts. He insists they skip the talk and move on to the next stage, adding that they should leave ᴄᴏᴘᴘ behind. The older man calmly rejects this suggestion, pointing out that there are only 4 of them in the group. He sees no reason for conflict and encourages them to work together instead. Reluctantly, the blonde man agrees to go along with the plan, though his irritation is evident. Grateful for the older man's intervention, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ thanks him, but curiosity soon gets the better of him, and he asks how the man knew there were only 4 people in their group. Smiling, the man explains that it's thanks to a feature called the inventory. Intrigued, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ listens as the man describes how the inventory works. The older man tells ᴄᴏᴘᴘ to imagine storing his weapons in the inventory, explaining that the system will respond to his thoughts. Skeptical but intrigued, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ tries it out. To his amazement, the sword and shield vanish from his hands and appear safely stored in the inventory window. Excited, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ marvels at how seamlessly the inventory works. It feels just like being inside a video game, and for the first time, he starts to see the potential advantages of this strange new world. The older man proceeds to show ᴄᴏᴘᴘ how to access his status screen. Following his guidance, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ swipes to reveal his stats. As he examines them, disappointment sets in. His attributes appear weak in almost every area. However, the older man reassures him that this is normal for a beginner and nothing to worry about. Amid his low stats, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ notices his mana is unexpectedly high, which stands out as a promising feature. The man then introduces another feature, the community. Described as a notice board, it allows players to communicate with others across different rooms. Curious, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ opens the community screen and starts to grasp the bigger picture. Messages and participant counts reveal that players are separated by difficulty level. He confirms that the held difficulty room only has 4 participants, just as the older man had stated. This small number surprises him, as he hadn't anticipated so few people would have chosen the hardest mode. The man emphasizes the importance of cooperation, suggesting that working together might improve their chances of survival. Before moving forward, the man explains one final feature, the clock. He demonstrates how to access it by swiping at the edge of the screen. Following the instructions, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ discovers a countdown timer displaying 3 days until the first challenge begins. As ᴄᴏᴘᴘ reflects on these features, their resemblance to those found in RPGs becomes apparent. The inventory, the status screen, and the community chat give the experience the feel of an MMORPG. Recognizing this, he begins to see the others not as threats, but as potential allies in the trials ahead. To build rapport, ᴄᴏᴘᴘ suggests that they introduce themselves, acknowledging that fate has brought them together. The older man starts by providing his introduction, sharing his age, profession, and a small personal detail about his hobbies. The tension in the group shifts when the man who previously disliked ᴄᴏᴘᴘыឫ reluctantly introduces himself. His name is Cho Kyungmin, and though irritated, he shares some basic details, begrudgingly complying with the older man's insistence on cooperation. However, when Hoja introduces himself and casually mentions his background as a pro gamer, Kyungmin's attitude takes a surprising turn. He becomes intrigued and asks Hoja about the types of games he played professionally. Hoja explains that he specialized in games within the arts category, a term that piques Kyungmin's curiosity. Kyungmin mentions that his experience has been mostly in a popular game called Magic Online. Hoja surprises him further by revealing he also played the same game, though he quit after a major update that changed the game significantly. Kyungmin relates to this, and the shared connection eases the tension between them. Their conversation becomes animated as they bond over their gaming experiences, a dynamic that leaves the older man, Choi Min-sik, amused by how quickly they went from hostility to camaraderie. Meanwhile, the only woman in the group, Park Seo, grows visibly irritated at being left out of the discussion. She interrupts their chatter to introduce herself. She declares her passion for Anaheim and explains how deeply committed she is to the medium, detailing her extensive dedication. The intensity of her enthusiasm catches the men off guard, leaving them momentarily speechless. Realizing the conversation is veering off track, Hoja refocuses the group on the task at hand. He emphasizes that they need to analyze their current situation and the information they gathered so far. Hoja points out the similarities between their current circumstances and traditional RPG systems, starting weapons, status screens, and the structure of an MMORPG. Kyungmin agrees, acknowledging that the setup suggests they'll need to adopt roles and strategies commonly found in such games. Hoja takes the lead in explaining the importance of forming a balanced party. He highlights how cooperative play allows for optimizing each person's chosen weapon and strengths. To plan effectively, he suggests they reveal their weapons and assign roles accordingly. The group agrees, and one by one, they showcase their chosen tools. When Kyungmin and Choi Min-sik present their weapons, both turn out to be melee-based, a sword and an axe respectively. Hoja feels a pang of disappointment. Hoping for some balance, he looks to Seo, expecting her to have selected a ranged weapon like a bow or throwing knives. However, she too reveals a sword. Seeing the lineup of close combat weapons, Hoja quickly realizes their party is severely unbalanced. Without a healer, mage, or ranged attacker, their setup lacks versatility, which could spell trouble in the challenges ahead. ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ is stunned as he processes the reality of their situation. All four of them have chosen melee weapons, creating a severely unbalanced party. He can't help but feel a sense of frustration, but he knows there's no use dwelling on it now. Min-sik, noticing the tension, shifts the focus by asking what the tutorial is all about and why it starts in 3 days. Kyungmin explains that the tutorial is usually the stage where the game teaches its mechanics and systems. Seo, however, groans in frustration, expressing that 3 days of waiting before the tutorial begins feels like a waste of time. Seeing an opportunity to regroup and plan, Hoja suggests that they use the next 3 days to assign roles and train themselves. He points out that even if it's a tutorial, its difficulty can vary. Some tutorials, he warns, are punishing enough to cause an immediate failure or even a game over. Hoja highlights their current vulnerability. Their party is specialized in close combat, making them particularly weak against long-range attacks. To address this weakness, Hoja proposes they start by understanding the unique strengths of their weapons. Using his sword and shield as an example, he explains that he can block enemy attacks while dealing moderate damage, making him suitable for a defensive frontline role. Turning to Kyungmin, Hoja notes that his battle axe is likely designed for high damage output, making him the main damage dealer in close quarters. Together, Hoja and Kyungmin can form a solid frontline during battle. When Min-sik reveals his weapon, a trident, Hoja points out its potential as the only weapon in their group capable of attacking at a somewhat longer range. While it doesn't fully solve their lack of ranged coverage, it does give them an edge in certain situations. Hoja assigns Min-sik the role of rear guard, responsible for supporting them from behind and watching their backs during engagements. Hoja knows that their setup is far from ideal, but with proper coordination, they might be able to compensate for their lack of balance. Sua asks for her own role, and ᴄᴏᴘᴘᴘ hesitates, unsure where to place her in their current setup. Eventually, he suggests that she can support him from the back, hoping to avoid a confrontation. However, Sua insists that her longsword is nearly as long as Minsic's trident, so she believes she can handle the same role as him. Hoji, though, is still doubtful and explains that staying in the rear would be the safest position for her, because she is a woman. This statement triggers an angry response from Sua. She calls out his outdated thinking about gender roles and confidently asserts that she can fight just as well as the others. Hoji's main concern, however, is that her longsword seems too long and unwieldy for someone to swing with one hand. He doubts her effectiveness, thinking she may not be able to use it properly in combat. Minsic, seeing a growing tension, advises Sua to listen to Hoji's advice, as they are playing a game with a hellish difficulty and they should trust a pro gamer's judgment. Sua reluctantly agrees, but the tension between them remains. The group starts their training, and Sua is seen shouting out her attack skills during a sparring match with Minsic. Kyungmin, grown increasingly frustrated with her approach, tells her to stop announcing her moves, but Sua insists on continuing. Even Minsic tries to advise her, but Sua stubbornly ignores him and continues shouting her attacks. Amid the chaos of their training, Hoji realizes something important about their situation. In this waiting room, their wounds heal automatically, their health is restored, broken weapons are repaired, and they don't feel hunger or fatigue. While this is a relief, Hoji begins to worry about the possibility of death in the game. In most RPGs, dying simply means respawning in a village or a safe zone, but he wonders if this game lacks a revival feature. If they die here, would it truly be game over? The thought unsettles him. As the training continues, Kyungmin and Minsic are engaged in their own sparring match, and Hoji and Sua discuss the issue of leadership. Hoji points out that if Minsic were the leader, the party would likely be more focused on defense, while with Kyungmin in charge, they would likely lean more toward an aggressive, all-out offensive strategy. He admits that the latter might be fun, but it would come with its own risks. Sua, sensing Hoji's potential, remarks that she already sees him as the leader. She explains that despite his age, he is remarkably composed and level-headed, which makes him a natural leader in her eyes. Hoji, a bit taken aback by her words, shares a bit of his past, explaining that he had to work hard to get good grades to convince his parents to allow him to pursue a career as a pro gamer. He adds, however, that he eventually retired from gaming. Sua is curious and asks why he retired. Before Hoji can answer, though, their conversation is interrupted when Kyungmin gets injured during his spar with Minsic. Then it's only 10 seconds left until the tutorial, to which everyone was getting ready. Then 4 portals to the tutorial opened to each of them. They were shocked, realizing that they were going to have an individual battle. They practice in group battles, to which they began to falter that the training might be in vain, however. Hojo encouraged them that it was not in vain, to which he told them to stay safe, hoping to see them all later. The portal was then activated, and the time limit for the tutorial stage is 24 hours for the held difficulty and on the first floor. Hojo is seen as he gets to the dark hallway feeling excited that it's finally getting started. As the tutorial begins, a chill runs down Hoji's spine, but he forces himself to stay calm. He notices that the system hasn't closed yet, and suddenly, it asks if he wants to travel to the first floor waiting room. Hojo, realizing that he can return there whenever he wants, considers it a nice feature. He clicks the yes button, and moments later, he finds himself in the first waiting room. However, there's no one there, and he's surprised to see that the tutorial seems to have finished in just 1 minute. He considers the possibility of returning to the waiting room whenever he wants, but he wonders what will happen once the time runs out. Just as he's thinking this, the system reappears, informing him that he has 24 hours to enter the next stage. Hojo quickly deduces that the automatic recovery feature is still in effect, and that as long as he can return to the waiting room, he will survive, even if he's on the brink of death during the tutorial. This realization brings him some relief. As Hojo makes his way to the first floor, he unexpectedly runs into So. She's shocked to find him there and confesses that she didn't believe it was possible to return to the waiting room, even though she tried it herself and found that it worked. Hojo, relieved to know she's figured it out too, lets her know that he thought the same. He then explains to So that the automatic recovery feature still applies here, meaning that if she gets injured during the tutorial, she can come back to the waiting room to heal. So sees the value in this, and suggests that it would be helpful for the other 2 guys to know about this tactic as well. She asks Hojo if they should wait for them, and he agrees. As the countdown continues, so begins to doubt whether anicaps will actually make it back to the first floor in time. To ease her mind, Hoja checks the community stats and sees that the number of people in the game hasn't changed. He realizes that it's not game over yet for the others. So, still concerned about the ticking clock, suggests that they should leave and not wait any longer. Hoja agrees with her idea, understanding that the time limit is something they can't ignore. As Hoja and So are about to return to their respective positions, So unexpectedly makes a request. She asks Hoja to teach her how to play games when they return, so they can enjoy the experience together. Hoja agrees, smiling at the idea of helping her. But then, to his surprise, So moves closer to him, causing him to briefly wonder if she's about to do something strange. However, she suddenly turns away and adds that she would like to know more about him once they return. She then quickly leaves, leaving Hoja standing there, feeling a bit confused by the moment. Now alone on the first floor, Hoja decides to check his status and review the system. He sees that the time limit is still in effect, and he realizes there's still much about this world he doesn't understand. One thing that stands out to him is the absence of HP and MP gauges. He briefly worries about it, but quickly dismisses the concern, reminding himself that as long as he avoids distant deaths, he can always return to the waiting room to recover. With that in mind, he decides to press forward and give the system a try, disappearing once again. As he walks, a thought crosses his mind. His status indicates that he is human, which means there are likely other races in this world. He can only guess what kind of species they might be. Feeling confident, he mentally challenges any opponent who might come his way, ready for whatever would come next. However, 30 minutes pass, and still nothing happens. Hoja walks the entire time without encountering any enemies, and there are no events or triggers. Though confused, he keeps his guard up, fully aware that any moment could bring an attack. He reminds himself not to underestimate the game, as his concentration, owned as a pro gamer, keeps him sharp. Then the system suddenly displays his battle status, showing 2 skills: concentration and willpower, both at level 1. Hoja can't quite believe it. He has gained skills, but he doesn't fully understand what they mean yet. Intrigued, he clicks on the concentration skill to learn more. The description reveals that concentration increases during battle, as he stays focused for longer periods. Both concentration and willpower are passive skills, meaning they are always active once obtained, without needing manual activation. Hoja then recalls something he knows from RPGs. Skills are typically divided into 2 categories, active and passive. Active skills are manually triggered by the user, while passive skills are always in effect once gained. Realizing this, he understands that the skills he has obtained are related to his current situation, his ability to stay focused, and his inner strength during challenges. He also realizes that to gain more skills, he needs to perform various actions. The more actions he takes, the more likely he is to unlock new skills. This is valuable information that could help him and his party. He considers sharing this discovery with others, maybe posting it in the community for everyone to see. But as he was thinking about that, he suddenly began feeling something from the atmosphere. So he was alert as he could see that something was coming from over the dark corridor right in front of him. He could not see anything that was tormenting him, yet he was feeling the pressure that even the atmosphere was controlling him as it would carry him and smash him into the wall. So he got injured and was bleeding already. He felt the pain so much. A long-range attack strikes Hoja's leg, and he nearly screams in agony as the force of the blow tears through him. The pain is unbearable, and he wonders what's going on. His thoughts flash to the waiting room, and he considers escaping there. But before he can move, another arrow is shot, landing right where the first one hit. He narrowly avoids being struck again, but the arrows keep coming, one after another. Hoja barely manages to dodge them, each passing second feeling like an eternity. The pain in his leg is excruciating, but it's not just physical. The uncertainty of the situation gnaws at him. If he dies, what will happen to him? Will he really just die here, with no chance to try again? As if to answer his fears, another arrow strikes him, this time lodging itself in his back. He lets out a strangled cry, blood spilling from his mouth as the agony intensifies. The arrows continue to rain down on him, each one getting closer. Hoja feels like he's on the verge of collapse, and for a fleeting moment, he wonders if it would just be easier to die and start over. But then his thoughts shift to the people he's been with. Their faces flash before his eyes. He can't give up. Not like this. With sheer determination, he pulls the arrow from his back, and despite the pain, continues crawling forward. His mind is set. He won't die here. He won't let it end like this. He's going to clear this game. He has to. Just as his strength is about to fail him, a portal suddenly appears before him, accompanied by a system message asking if he wants to travel to the first-floor waiting room. Hoji's heart pounds in his chest, and with every ounce of willpower he has left, he manages to enter the portal. In an instant, he finds himself back in the waiting room, gasping for breath. He can't believe he made it out. The tutorial is far harder than he expected. His body aches, but there's no time to rest. He quickly checks the community, and his eyes widen as he sees the messages. The others are still in the game, but something about the situation doesn't feel right. Hoji stares at his community screen, his heart sinking as he realizes the grim truth. He's the only one left in the Hell Mode player group. The other three are dead. At first, he can't believe it. His mind refuses to accept it. But then, as the reality sinks in, he understands that the others might not have known about the waiting room, the one chance they had to escape. He can't hold back the tears as the weight of their deaths crushes him. The idea that they are gone because of something he could have shared with them haunts him. After a while, he gathers himself and checks his status. To his surprise, he's gained new passive skills, and he notices a new notification. The system prompts him to enter the stage again, warning him that the time remaining is 19 hours and 12 minutes. He feels a surge of determination. He won't let the others' deaths be in vain. He's going to clear this tutorial, no matter what. With a deep breath, he heads back to the first floor, his mind already sharp and focused. As he steps into the stage, he instinctively feels the blood and pain vanish. It's as if the whole world has reset, like a game rebooting after a loss. It's unsettling, but it gives him hope. The system has reset everything. His health, his position, the threats. This gives him a fighting chance. Then, without warning, he hears the familiar whistle of the first arrow slicing through the air toward him. It's aimed straight at his right ankle, just like before. But this time, Hoji is prepared. He dodges it easily, already anticipating where the attack is coming from. The knowledge of the previous stage helps him stay one step ahead. But as he breathes a little easier, another arrow comes for him. His shield is raised to block it, but the impact shatters it, sending a sharp jolt through his body. 3 arrows follow in quick succession, each one striking him hard, critically wounding him. The pain surges through him, and he can feel himself faltering. His vision begins to blur, and he's sure that death is imminent. But just as his body begins to crumple, another notification flashes before his eyes. Agility, vitality, and pain tolerance have increased. The boost in his stats is enough to pull him from the brink of death. With a newfound strength, Hoji grits his teeth and forces himself back onto his feet. His shield, shattered moments ago, is beginning to regenerate. His wounds are healing as well. The arrows that had lodged in his body are gone. The system is providing him with an automatic recovery, just as he hoped. As the relentless barrage of arrows suddenly ceases, Hoji breathes a momentary sigh of relief. The pain subsides, and he takes the opportunity to check his status window. To his surprise, he discovers that he's leveled up to level 1. His entire body feels restored as if the damage he sustained has completely disappeared. It's then that he realizes the connection between his level up and his recovery. Just like when he returns to the waiting room, everything is restored upon leveling up. He processes this information carefully. There are 2 methods he can use to recover now. First, leveling up, and second, returning to the waiting room. Both methods offer him a safety net, and with this newfound knowledge, Hoji starts to feel more confident. He can attempt the traps as many times as he wants, knowing that leveling up is possible even in the most life-threatening situations. He could push himself to the limit, get hit by arrows, and still survive. Each death and subsequent recovery would make him stronger. It's a grim but useful tactic. He realizes that if he hadn't been on the brink of death, he would never have come up with such an idea with a clear mind. But now, with his level up and the knowledge of how things work, he feels invigorated. He's stronger now, and with each new challenge, he'll grow even more powerful. His mind sharpens with motivation, knowing that this grueling process will eventually lead to his victory. Just as he's mentally preparing himself for what's next, a new notification appears, one that catches him off guard. The system announces that the god of adventure shows an interest in him.